Usually it says recording. Okay. Um, the so they give so they do a lot of these different classes, and so they get different synagogues to kind of teach them once in a while. And so I'm doing this 5 week one. But after these 5 weeks are over, I'll still be teaching basic Judaism weekly, or it's not really basic Judaism, it's just a kind of general Judaism class. Um, Weekly, but this will have 5 topics. It's the 5 topics are belief in God and prayer, commandments, that kind of thing. It's sort of more general. And there was also a little pamphlet that they printed some point a while back, but they put it's digital now, and you can see it. I think I forwarded a link to it. I assume that came through also, right? The link work and everything. Okay, good, good. So it's funny. We've not really talked very much. Often my weekly class ends up being focused on the Torah portion or Jewish law or kind of whatever people's questions are. We've not actually delved much into kind of the bigger basic questions. I'll tell you the 5 topics that are going to be in this. And it's belief in God, prayer, Shabbat, observance, and sexuality. That's the 5. So we've talked a lot about some of those things in this class ongoing, but it's funny because the first of these classes is belief in God, and I don't know if that's really something that we've talked about. Um, there is sometimes a criticism, I think, of Jews that we don't always talk about God enough. That maybe Christians talk a lot about God, but not so much about ritual. But Jews tend to talk a lot about ritual and about Torah and about commandments, and about the details of commandments, but we don't always necessarily talk about God. Have you ever had that sense or that experience? Some of you I know are new to Judaism or may not even know, but the and I do you have a sense of any reason why that might be, by the way? I mean, in the Shema itself, which is the most basic Jewish prayer, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. The next line of that is, and you should love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. So there's definitely a relationship there. It's not that God is only abstract. I guess I'm asking partly maybe a thought question, partly a sociological question. Why might it be that the more observant the Jew is, the less they're sort of talking about God?
Because they're more focused on mitzvahs and then
If they're all born Jewish, everybody be yelling at the same time. So I can see we've got folks here on that point. I'm just kidding around. So I think it's that for Jews, there's a very basic contradiction within all religion. The most basic, I would say, contradiction in all of religion is that God, at least in the Western world, God is both the monotheistic God, is both infinite, right? Omnipotent, has no end, has no place, right? It's a God that, I mean, when you start to talk about God that way, that's extremely abstract. A God that not only creates the world, but is infinite. What does that even mean? How can you even conceive of such a thing, right? That's, in a certain sense, it's a very distant God. But at the same time, certainly in Judaism, and I know it's true in other religions, God is also personal. God is the God that commands. God is the God that you love and that loves you back. God is the God that protects you. God is the God that rewards and punishes. God is the very personal God. The God of the Bible is extremely personal. Um, you know, the, so how do you put those two together? I mean, how do you have, when you're in the mode of thinking about God as infinite, it's hard to imagine having a personal relationship. If you imagine having a personal relationship with God, well, that takes God a little bit away from being, infinite beyond the universe, which is everything. God is everything. I mean, so Judaism, I think, deals with that in a few different ways. I think that's part of the purpose of the commandments in Judaism, that concretizes. Obviously, Christians solve this in a very different way, right? They have different sort of elements of God, and some of those are extremely concrete. For Jews, I think the idea is that, and I think this sort of explains why some Jews might shy away from talking about God. Because in a certain way, we talk about God. Some people say that prayer is the way we talk to God, and the Torah, the study of Torah, which is so basic in Judaism, is the way that God talks to us. And that's how we know how to interact with God because we have the commandments. And the commandments are do this, do that, do it this way, do it that way. And so you can fathom a God like that. But once you start to sort of talk about what God is, what God means, and I'm not saying we don't do that in Judaism, we do. Maimonides certainly does, and others. But I think there's a wariness, perhaps, in Judaism sometimes of talking about God. And that may be a problem. I mean, maybe we need to talk more about our relationship with God. It's very important, I think, to have a relationship with God. So this class is supposed to be about belief in God. I want to share my screen with you and show you something from a non-Jewish author who I really love. I don't know if I love everything he writes, but this was from let's see. And I like this so much that like every year I end up kind of posting what's going on here. I end up sort of posting it on Facebook. Hello. And it's from an author named David Foster Wallace. He was mostly a fiction author. He actually killed himself, I think, in his 30s or 40s, maybe about 10, 15 years ago. But this was from I just Googled it to find it. I guess it was printed in the Wall Street Journal once, but it's from a graduation speech that he gave at, I think, a Bard College. And as part of that, he wrote, that in the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there's actually no such thing as atheism. There's no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And an outstanding reason for choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship. JC, oh yeah, he has, he's not talking about sort of, how to get to God, but he's talking about belief generally. Is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. Never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when the time comes that you start to age, you will die a million deaths. On one level, we all know the stuff already. It's been codified as myths. Worship power, and you will feel weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, and you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out, and so on. Okay, that's what I wanted to sort of get at. So I think it's a profound idea, and that's why I want to start this about belief with it, because human beings, I think what he's saying is that human beings have an inner sense of something larger. Human beings, and it's very easy though for us to get caught up in worshiping things that don't matter. And it's funny that Talmud says that if the evil inclination comes to you, right, to sin, in Judaism, there's a sense of a good inclination, evil inclination, as if it's like these two little parrots on your shoulder. One's telling you to do good things, one bad things. I think Christianity has different names for them. But the Talmud says if the evil inclination comes and, entices you to sin, you should use the good inclination to fight against it. Talmud says, if that doesn't work, say the Shema. The Shema is a one-line declaration from the book of Deuteronomy that says, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And the Talmud says, if that doesn't work, study the Torah. If that doesn't work, think of the day of death. Right? Why is that sort of the last thing? Because when we think about the fact that we are temporary, think about the day of death, that makes us think about what is really meaningful. And when we think about what's really meaningful, a lot of the stuff that we think or sometimes is meaningful or that we pursue is not really ultimately meaningful. And there are things that I think could vie for that position besides God, things like social justice, morality, making the world a better place, right? Some people, but ultimately, if there's no God, there's no commander. And if you have a God that creates the universe but doesn't care what you do, that doesn't really help either. That doesn't really matter who created the universe. For Judaism, there has to be a God that not only creates the universe, but that is involved in the universe, cares about the universe, and has a moral program for the universe. And without that, if you think about it, like where does meaning come from? Where does morality come from? Right? So we all have a sense of conscience, but when push comes to shove, if nobody's looking, there's nothing really to say that one thing is better than another. In a certain way, it would be very hard to have morality without there being a kind of divine revelation, something coming from outside of us. Often it's hard for people to sort of believe in God because it feels very abstract. We don't see God. But of course, the idea is that if something creates the world, it can't be part of the world. There's a rabbi who sometimes compares this to Monopoly. He says, that hat sort of says to the shoe, I've been going around this Monopoly board my whole life. I've gone around go 1,000 times, start 1,000 times, and people talk about this Parker Brothers, but I never saw him, and I just don't believe he exists. And right, so that's sort of us, is we imagine that like all we know is the game, all we know is the world. And so the idea that, I mean, the fascinating thing is that human beings actually have a sense of something larger, right? That's not uncommon. That human beings have a sense of something larger. Human beings have a sense that there has to be meaning, more than just the physical sensations and desires that we fulfill. So way back when Judaism began, in the time of Abraham, there are ways in which Judaism is different than all of those other things. You had ancient Near Eastern codes of law, but they were lacking what we would call Western morality. In the codes of Hammurabi, there was law, but if you killed a slave, nothing happened to you. Certainly, if it was your own slave. The idea that killing a slave could get you the death penalty, that's Judaism. Why? Because only Judaism has a sense. I mean, now after Judaism, obviously other monotheistic religions have this also. But if you don't have a God that creates the world, you don't have a God that, as Maimonides says, creates and guides the world and cares about the world, so then you can't have human beings made in the image of God. And I would say one of the most profound ideas in the Torah, and it's right there way, way at the beginning, when the human being is created, they're created in the image of God. And in the book of in a few chapters later, after the story of Noah, when Noah is told that he can eat the animals, he's told, but you can't eat the human beings, you can't kill the human beings, he's told, because they're made in the image of God. And so not only does the Bible say human beings are made in the image of God, and there's lots of argument in Judaism. What does that mean? Does that mean intellect? Does it mean free choice? Or does it mean there's a divine soul, right? God forms the human being out of dirt and blows into the human being the breath of life. The Talmud says that God, when one breathes from their essence, that what God is breathing into us is divinity. Rabbi Shner Zalman Liadi, one of the early Hasidic rabbis, he says that the soul is an actual part of God from above. We are each not only made in the image of God, we, at some level, have godliness within us. And without that sense of being made that human beings are made in the image of God, it's sort of it's survival of the fittest, and conscience only gets you so far. Germany was the land of the greatest culture in the beginning of the 19th century ever, and it did not translate into morality. I want to take a look. Any questions, by the way? We'll stop for questions periodically.
Since you brought it up, I've been wanting to
Yeah.
find out more about like Jews prior to World War
I
II.
want to take a look at the Ten Commandments.
If there's like a good resource for that.
Because you'll notice something I think that can be instructive. So here, this is in the book of Exodus in chapter 20. Jewish people are standing at Mount Sinai, and the Torah tells us God spoke all the following words to the Jewish people. It begins with the word Anochi, which means I. Right, and the word, it's interesting. The Torah begins with the letter Bet, Bereshit, in the beginning. With the letter Bet is the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet. But the Ten Commandments, which the mystics say mirror on some level linked to the 10 sayings with which God created the world. If you count up in Genesis and Bereshit, you'll see that God says, let there be 10 times. But this begins with an Aleph, with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And Aleph is numerically, each letter of the Hebrew alphabet has a number associated with it. And Aleph is 1. I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. So, any questions about that, by the way? Is that how you would have started the Ten Commandments? Any other options? Let's see something in the chat here. You know what? That would explain a lot. I was wondering why everybody was so quiet. I wonder if my headphones are not working. I'm going to take you off my headphones. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me. Okay. Are you able to hear me? Yeah? Somebody talk. I want to see if I can hear you.
Can you hear us?
You're talking, right?
Hello?
Let me get a wired. Okay.
Hello?
Try talking one more
Hello? Hello?
time. You know, we might let me try this. I think bizarre. Let's try. I'm gonna try restarting my computer. So you're all gonna have to relog. Or maybe you won't have to. Maybe if I just restart my computer a lot, maybe you'll still. think this might be working. You able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
I can hear
we
you.
can hear you, Rabbi Schaffner.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You can hear me okay? If you're having trouble hearing my voice, I have wired headphones.
We can hear you.
Great. Okay. Let's see, Jesse's, you had a question? Right.
Oh yeah, I was wondering the other day how I can learn about like Jews prior to World War II because it seems like there's a lot obviously that was erased, that was lost. Is there any resources or is it just gone? Like is it just you know what I'm trying to get at? Like
Sure. I don't think there's any lack of resources about the history of the Jewish people. I mean, there's, I mean,
I meant like maybe like Jewish German culture prior to World War II.
oh, Germany.
Um yeah, like any like
We have
people
all
that
the-
were literally almost erased.
Yeah, no, we have their books that they wrote, lots and lots. Yeah. And you can certainly read about them in history books.
If you can give me some references, that would be awesome. I mean, not right now, obviously, or
There's
if any come to mind.
There's a book called The History of the Jews by Gratz. Yeah, you look up the history of the Jews,
Mhm.
you'll find it. But there's probably tons of articles.
Okay.
Okay, let me go back to here. Okay, so so if I were writing the first of the Ten Commandments, I'm the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, I might write it a little bit differently, right? I might say, I'm the Lord your God who created the world. Why talk about God as the creator, the one who? Why does that? I mean, this is where God is saying to the Jews, I'm God.
Well, isn't this where God establishes a personal relationship with his people?
Yeah, I think that's right. And of course, these people have just come out of Egypt. So, in a sense, I guess that's what's powerful. Maybe belief in God comes in a certain way, not from philosophy or theology, because you can argue anything. Maybe it comes from history. In other words, I think one of the ways, I think there are many ways actually to come to belief in God. But certainly one of them is God in history. And certainly Jewish history in particular. There's a kind of miraculous bent to it. Actually found online timeline of anti-Semitism. Wikipedia really does have everything. So here's I don't know who wrote this, but Jews are kicked out of one country after another. We have the destruction of the temples and the exile of the Jews. We have, in the time of Hanukkah, we have obviously Persia, the attempt to kill the Jews. We have the exile of the Jews from Spain in 1492. We have Crusades, in which hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed. We have the killing of the Jews, the exile of whoever was left of the Jews from England. I just googled it. And then of course it goes on and on down. You have the pogroms, Litsky pogroms. You have the Byzantine Empire, and we of course have a day when we mourn all of this, Shabbat, saddest day the calendar. But and then of course the Holocaust. And the very perplexing thing about Jews is that they're still here. There are many countries that have persecuted,
but they're not here anymore. You know, the Romans of the ancient world, or the Romans of today, or the Persians of the ancient world, Persians of today. For the Persians, the only thing they have in common is dating to the ancient. But fighting them again, you know, that's Iran. But there's no commonality. What they believe, how they practice, how they dress, none of that is the same. But the Jew has stayed the same, in a sense, throughout history. Not exactly the same, but you know what we practice. The Sabbath of Jews 3,000 years ago, the Sabbath of Jews today, it's different in terms of what you're not using, you know, your cell phone or whatever. But basically, Sabbath, kosher, I mean, all of it. The Jew has not changed very much, and has somehow persevered through history. And that's sort of one way that some people have a sense of belief in God. And some say that that's kind of what the first commandment is the God of history. There are other ways, I think, that one can approach faith. It's you know, I think another one, and some of these things I think are very personal for people. There are people that try to prove God. I don't think you can do that. But for me, from a Jewish perspective, I see living a Jewish life as what Jessa's writing means the infinite. So, Enod Milvado means there's nothing else beside. So, I don't know. I mean, if it was God who talked about the creation of the world, Jessa, I would say that might be true. But this is God who's talking about the out of Egypt. That's not a God who's saying, you know, there's nothing else besides me. I am everything. Here God is saying, you know, partner, area. But I think another way to sort of think about God is, besides history, is at least for me, it's the living of religion, living of Jewish. In the living of religious life, one has a sense of the divine. One has a sense of, I mean, for me as a Jew, so much is ritual that, you know, for instance, on Shabbat, feels different than it does during the week. You know, the way that the commandments have sort of stayed relevant over time, which is shocking. You know, and that kind of built into the system of the Torah is a, I mean, I guess there's an oral tradition that sort of does change something. For me, there's another way also. Something else that prompts me to belief in God or to faith in something larger is existential. That, you know, for me, I just cannot buy that the universe is here for no reason. And without an intelligent God, whatever that means, and obviously this can be translated to every religion. You don't have to be Jewish to believe in an intelligent creator. Maybe even somebody of Eastern religion. But the sense that there is something bigger, you know, that without that, there cannot be a sense of meaning. And I cannot sort of buy. I mean, obviously, one could look out at the world and say, "There's nothing. You know, this is it. You know, there's no reason to be moral. There's no reason to do anything. We just are here because we survive. You know, we beat out certainly. But I think the idea, the fact that human beings have a sense of something much larger means something. And for me, it's that existential sense that moves me. You know, that feeling. I think we all have it, you know, of our own consciousness. You know, that the human being has a consciousness of the infinite, that we can even conceive of something, that we have self. You know, the death of the human being feels so complete and so powerful. And we dread it because we are ourselves. We know ourselves. Consciousness. Yeah. Human being, in a certain sense, is larger something's missing. Those for me are kind of where sense of something bigger comes from it. I don't know for you. I mean, there's there could be for other people other reasons. Obviously, if you're here in this class tonight, here I'm in a certain sense I'm talking to the choir. But what's your sense of the divine God? How do you relate to belief? Born Jewish, to learn more, not Jewish. It's sort of funny to give this class to, this class really, the National Jewish Outreach Program is meant for trying to engage people who are Jewish more in their Judaism. But I think, lots of us on this call here are either not Jewish or interested in being Jewish. It's sort of funny because, in a way, we try not to convince non-Jews to become Jewish, but we try to convince Jews to be more Jewish. And so I'm sort of teaching a class where, in a way, it's a class to kind of try to argue that it's good to be a Jew, but for anyone who's not Jewish who's coming to this class because they're interested, they don't need that. They're already interested. This is really for the Jews who have trouble with. But if you'd like, maybe share what's your sense of the divine, of God. I'm sure you've thought of it.
I mean, for me, it's Ein Od Milvado. Like that's what I say to myself anytime I feel fear or uncertainty or anything, because there is nothing else but him. That's all there is. It's the only truth. And I see ourselves as a reflection of Hashem as well. So we're each a piece. It's like we have the same piece of soul of Hashem or something. We're connected in that deep way where our souls are united. So I don't know. That's what it is for me.
Could be something we already talked about. Could be you're agnostic. You know the joke of of course that's also one of the Jewish, but famous comedian, he was doing this routine called the 2000 Goal, and it's do with Carl Reiner, who was a straight man, and he pretended to be. If you Google it, you can hear the recordings stand up, and so he pretended to be this guy who was 2,000 years old. And so Carl Reiner says to him, when you were in the caves, did you believe in God? And he says, well, we didn't really believe in God. We believed in Phil. And he says, what do you mean you believed in Phil? He said, well, Phil was the biggest among us, and so we thought he was God. He was so powerful. So Carl Reiner says, well, did you pray to him? He says, oh yeah, we prayed to him. He said, oh Phil, please don't hurt us. Please don't step on us. And so Carl Reiner says, and was that it? How did people come to God? He says, well, one day, lightning struck Phil, and Phil died. And we looked up and we said, oh, something bigger than Phil. So I mean, obviously it's a joke, but there's something deep about it, which is that when we sort of look at the universe and we see the vastness, sometimes I read something about planets and the size of the universe, and I think to myself, it's so crazy that I walk around and I think, things in my immediate surroundings are the whole world. I think that our Earth is the whole world, and if you think about the size of the universe, you push your brain out there. The vastness is it's unfathomable, right? It's not even, a million miles, not even a trillion miles. It's not even, a million light years. It's so much more. And there's, how many planets are there? Well, there's not just a million, not just a billion. There's like a trillion. What does that even mean? It's crazy. We often see ourselves as in the center. On the other hand, we are sort of intelligent life. We feel a sense that we've been put here. Certainly Judaism does put here for. And so I think there's a lot of different approaches. are some who would argue that none of those are why Jews. The reason Jews believe in God is because God will reveal himself. That's the tradition. We have a tradition, and we all stood at Mount Sinai. Not that one person heard it, said something else, that we all stood at. And that's what we've said. And it's because of that experience, and because of Torah, and because of the relationship with God. Any questions? We'll look a little bit more at it. So that might be the first commandment. It's not really a commandment, it just says I know. Second one certainly is don't have any. Don't make any gods. By the way, there's not necessarily 10. You count them up. There might be 9, there might be 13. Depends how you enumerate. What do we have so far, right? You could say this is 3. If this is 3, and is this a separate one? Hard to know. Or in vain, remember the Shabbat. And then typically we assume that this is all on the first tablet. And then the last one on the first tablet is honor your father. So what we have is one God, not to have any other gods, not to worship idols, the Shabbat, Sabbath, and honoring him. That's the first tablet. What's on the second tablet? Not to murder, not to commit adultery, not to steal, not to bear false witness, not to covet. Those are the 5 commandments on the second. Right? What's the difference between? Is there any commonality between the first one and the second? Between why are they on 2 different tablets? Why not just put them all on one tablet? You ever thought about that? Why does it have to be 2 tablets? One tablet. They've been easier to carry.
One tablet is for the commandments between ourselves and Hashem, and the other is between ourselves and others.
Good.
Ourselves and man.
Very good. So if you look, you'll see the first 5 are commandments between us and God, right? Having one God, not idols, Shabbat, honor your father and mother, and then the last 5 between us and other people. Except that it doesn't really work. One of them's out of place. There's one on the first tablet that really should be on the second. One God, no idols, Sabbath, honor your father and mother. That's what's on the first tablet. So most of those are about our commandments between us and God. But one of those does not seem to be about, right? Which is honor your father and mother. Honor your father and mother should really go on the second tablet with all the with the 5 commandments between us and people. Why is honor your father and mother on the between us and God tablet and everything, and not?
Could it be because the father and mother sort of represent God in a way? I mean, creating life, like 2 opposites coming together. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that's right. That in a certain way, your parents are a little bit like God. They create you. You owe them honor. Perhaps that's true of God also. We owe honor to God. And we're commanded also not just to honor our parents, but also fear them. Different places. So could be that's similar to God, right? Maybe Rabbi Soloveitchik once said that we learn about our relationship with God through our relationships with God. How can you know what it is to love God? It's impossible. You can know what it is to love people, and then you can try and extract it. How can you know what it means to feel gratitude for being born, for living, for being taken care of? and to praise God. You can't, but you can know what it is to have that relationship. Think about your parents. Think about the fact that you would not exist except for your parents. And so we can learn from our parental relationship. We can, in Judaism, we have all kinds of relationships. God is called our parent, God is our king. God is, in the book of the Song of Songs, God is a kind of lover between God and the Jewish people. And so you can learn from the spousal relationship. So we have all of these human relationships, and that's how human beings know things. We know things as humans. You can't know God directly. Well, maybe no. Any interesting that each letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a right after the Ten Commandments are mentioned, the Jewish people say to Moses, we're going to obey, but don't let God talk to us, lest we die. And the Talmud says that it was after the first two commandments that the Jewish people said. So actually, if you look at the word Torah, right, you have gematria is a word in Hebrew for the numerical values. So Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3. And the word Torah is made up of 4 letters, right? This word, which is the last letter, that 400. Resh, Vav, 6. Resh, which is 200. And Hey, which is 5. What is that up to? Right, 400 and 200 is 600. And above it's 6. And A is 5. So that's 611. So the word Torah adds up to 600. And we have a verse in the Bible that says, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, that Moses commanded us the Torah. And we have a tradition that there are 613 commandments. But the word Torah is 611. And it's because the first 2 were said by God. But then all the other commandments were given to us by Moses. Certainly, this numerical value also works with, there's a commandment called tzitzit, put fringes on the corner of your garments. Usually that is today. First, numbers 59 is also in the Shemot. It'll be the fringe, and you look at it in full. It says, speak to the Jewish people and instruct them to make themselves fringes on the corner of their garments. And they should have a blue fringe on each corner. And you should look at it, look at it, and remember all the commandments of God. Don't go after. So the word tzitzit, you can see, is 4 letters here. Sadi, Yud, Sadi. And this also has an error, right? Sadi, Yud, Sadi. So, how much is that? Tzadi is 90. And Yud is 10. Tzadi and Yud is 100. And then we have another Tzadi. And then Tuf at the end, which is 400. That makes 600. And on the tzitzit, if you look at a picture of tzitzit, fringe, see that it is this is tzitzit. Jewish men wear them under clothing. And also, if you, many Jewish men wear talit, which is like a bigger four-cornered garment. Well, so how many knots do you have? You have 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. With the tradition that this is how you tie the tzitzit. There's some slightly different ways, but everybody has 5. And there are 8 strings. There's really 4 strings, but it's doubled over. It's here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you have this on each corner of the. So you can see, here's the talit. Here's tzitzit with a blue thread. The blue thread was lost for many millennia, but then it was refound again. But how much does 5 knots and 8 threads add up to? Of course, 13. So the word tzitzit is the numerical value 600. But when you add the threads and the knots, you get 13, 613. That's all the commandments. That's the number of commandments. So that's why it says you should look at the tzitzit and remember all the commandments. And that's just a cute thing. I mean, it's not necessarily plain meaning text, but it is interesting that there is this element. Looking at the tzitzit, the word tzitzit itself seems to indicate that it encompasses all. This blue thread was refound recently. This comes from a snail in Ukraine. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. And you can hear me, right? Yeah. So people have started wearing. Actually, we wear. Oh, that was I opened up my. Okay. Any questions? We have a few minutes left. I think to open it up for questions. Obviously, the topic of this class is belief. Next time will be prayer. Doesn't mean that after these 5 weeks we can't talk about all these things more. I'm sure we will. We end up revisiting. Daniel, did you have a question? What are you raising? No.
I have a quick question about tzitzit. I noticed that the IDF soldiers are wearing, like, I always see shirts that are white when you're like wearing like a tzitzit, like when it's attached to the shirt, but like theirs are like obviously like an army green or something. Does it matter what color the shirt is?
No. So
Okay.
so it has to be made out of natural material and it has to be woven in order to be obligated to tzitzit. But and some people hold, Maimonides hold either wool or linen, but no, it really, the color does not matter. And you'll see that most taluses people wear in a synagogue are black and white, but are white with black stripes, but they don't have to be. you know. Yeah, the color doesn't really matter so much. It's the material, and if you it has to have four corners, and if you wear it as clothing, and so, yeah, I'm not surprised. Army green.
So as long as it's not mixed, like cloth or whatever, like two different materials mixed together, it's okay. Like,
It can be two different materials.
oh, it can be. Okay.
Yeah, just there's an argument about whether synthetic.
Okay.
But yeah, today most suits heating. It'll be either cotton or wool. Something like
Cool.
Very good. So as I said, I assume everybody got the email that I'm going to be going to Israel this week. So, so the next 2 Thursdays I will not be teaching, but then we will.
I had a question about
Yeah.
Shabbat service. I've been looking to come in on Saturday, but I can't always. Well, I know technically, eventually, I'd have to, get close to the show. But just initially, can I come on Friday? Do you?
Come any day you want. We pray twice a day and every day.
Okay, yeah. What are the minion times? So if I just want,
You go on the website, you'll see every day.
oh, okay, okay,
And because it does Friday night can change with sundown. Friday night's usually around candlelighting time.
okay,
But although once the clocks change, no. Yeah, it's usually at candlelighting time. Usually Friday night services, Saturday morning service usually at 9, and the daytime, the morning service is usually 7:15 a.m. Evening services, once the clocks change, are going to be at 7 p.m.
okay. If it's a minion time and I'm in town, I can just walk in.
Yeah,
Okay. Cool.
Very good. All right. So I wish everybody a good day and hear good things from the Middle East.
Safe
Have
travel.
a safe trip.
Have a safe trip, Rabbi Schaffner.
Um,
Bye.